Hey everyone, Razzbowski here, and welcome back to the Five Nights at Freddy's novel. We're moving on to chapter 3 today, so if you guys are hyped, then please hit that like button. Charlie felt a hand on her shoulder and opened her eyes. It was John, frowning at her like he was worried. Charlie, are you okay? No. Yes, she said. Come on, let's see what's in the workshop. It was not locked, and there was no real reason it should be, Charlie thought. Her eyes first went to the dark corner. The figure was not there. There was a weathered apron hanging in its place, the one her father had worn for soldering, and its goggles next to it, but there was no sign of that uncanny presence. Charlie should have felt relief, but she didn't. Only a vague unease. She looked around. There seemed to be almost nothing left of the workshop. The benches were there, where her father had assembled and tweaked his inventions, but the materials, the blueprints, and the half-finished robots that were once crammed onto every surface had disappeared. Where are they? Had her aunt had them carried away to the junkyard to rust and crumble among other discarded useless things? Or had her father done it himself, so no one else would have to? The concrete floor was littered here and there with scraps. Whoever had done the cleanup had not been thorough. Charlie knelt and picked up an oddly shaped scrap of wood, then a circuit board. She turned it over. Whose brains were you? She wondered, but it did not matter, really. It was battered and worn, the etched copper too badly scratched to repair, even if someone had wanted to. Charlie, John said from across the workshop. He was in the dark corner. If the skeleton had been there, it could have reached out to touch him. But it was not there. What? Come see what I found. Charlie went. John was standing beside her father's toolbox, and he stepped away as soon as she came over, giving her space. Charlie knelt down before him. It looked as though it had been polished. It was made of dark, stained wood, glossy with some kind of lacquer. She opened it gently. Charlie picked up an awl from the top tray and held it for a moment, the rounded wooden handle fitting into the palm of her hand as if it had been made for her to use. Not that she would know how. The last time she had picked it up, she could barely fit her fingers around its base. She picked up the tools one after another, lifting them from their places. The toolbox had wooden spaces, carved out to fit the precise shape of each item. The tools were polished and clean, their wooden handles smooth and their metal unrusted. They looked as though they had been used just that morning, wiped down and put away meticulously, like someone still cared for them. She looked at them with a fierce, unexpected joy, as if something she had fought for was returned to her. But her joy felt wrong, misplaced. Looking at her father's things set her off balance. Something in the world was not as it should be. Seized suddenly with an unfounded fear, she thrust the awl back into its place in the box, dropping it like something was burning. She closed the lid, but she did not stand. Memory overtook her, and she closed her eyes, not fighting against it. Her feet were wedged in the dirt, and two large calloused hands covered her eyes. Suddenly there was a bright light, and Charlie squinted, squirming impatiently to see what was before her. 3 complete and gleaming figures towered over her, motionless, the sun reflecting off every edge and contour. They were blinding to behold. "What do you think?" She heard the question, but she could not answer it. Her eyes hadn't adjusted. The 3 masses of standing metal all looked similar in structure, but Charlie had grown accustomed to seeing more than was there, imagining the final result. For a long time now, there had been 3 empty suits, hanging like carcasses from the rafter in the attic. Charlie knew that they had a special purpose, and now she understood what it was. 2 long beams protruded from the top at the head from one of the hulking masses. The head itself was solid and skull-like. The beams looked as though they had been violently thrust in there. "That's the rabbit!" Charlie squealed, proud of herself. "You aren't scared of him?" the voice asked. "Of course not! He looks like Theodore!" Theodore, that's right. The figure in the middle was more clearly rendered, its face was chiseled, its features distinct. It was clearly a bear. A single metal beam stuck out of the top of its head as well. Charlie was puzzled for a moment, then smiled. "For the top hat," she said with confidence. The last form was perhaps the most frightening. A long metal clamp protruded from its empty face, in place where a mouth might go. It was holding something on a platter, a metal structure that looked like a jaw, wires running like strewn spaghetti up and down the frame and in and out of sockets. "That one's scary," she admitted hesitantly. "Well, this part will look like a cupcake." Her father pressed down on the top and the jaw snapped shut, making Charlie jump then giggle. Suddenly her laughter stopped. She'd been so distracted she had forgotten. I'm not supposed to stand here. I don't stand here. Her hands were trembling. How could she have forgotten? The corner. She looked at the ground, unable to lift her eyes, unable to move. One of her shoes was untied. There was a screw next to her foot, and an old piece of tape, opaque with dirt. There was something behind her. Charlie? It was John. Charlie? She looked up at him. Sorry, I just lost this place. She stood and took a step forward, positioning herself in the place that she had remembered. She glanced behind her, as if the memory might manifest. The corner was empty. There was nothing. She knelt again and put her hand on the ground, fishing around until she found a small screw in the bare dirt. She palmed it, then looked closer. There was a small hole in the ground, exposed where she moved the loose dirt. Charlie ran her fingers over them, thoughtful. Charlie, I have to tell you something. There was something urgent in John's voice. Charlie looked around the workshop and stood up. Can we go outside? She said. I can't breathe in here. Yeah, of course, he said. He followed her out into the yard and back to the hide-and-seek tree. She was tired, a wrung-out exhaustion deep inside. She would be fine in a minute, but she wanted a place that held only silly childhood memories. She sat down in the grass, leaned against the trunk, and waited for John to talk. He settled himself cross-legged in front of her, a little stiffly, smoothing his pants, and laughed. Are you worried about getting dirty? Times change, he said with a wry smile. What do you have to tell me? She said, and his face grew serious. I should have said something a long time ago, he said. When something happens like that, you just don't trust your memory, don't trust your own mind. What are you talking about? Charlie said. Sorry. He took a deep breath. I saw someone that night. The night Michael disappeared. What do you mean? Remember when we were sitting at the table by the stage and the animals started going crazy? I remember, Charlie said. It had been bizarre, their movements upsetting. They were moving too fast, bending and spinning, cycling through their limited program moves over and over. They seemed frantic, panicked. Charlie was mesmerized. She should have been afraid of them, but she was not. She saw their juddering motion, a kind of desperation. She was reminded for a moment of dreams running, dreams where the world depended on her going just 10 steps forward, yet her body could only move in slow motion. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Chaotically, violently, the animatronic animals on the stage thrashed robotic limbs in all directions, their eyes rolling in their sockets. What did you see? Charlie said to John now, shaking her head as though she could rid it of the image. There was another mascot, he said. A bear. Freddy, Charlie said, interrupting without thinking. No, not Freddy. John took her hands as if trying to calm them both, but let go before he spoke again. It was standing right next to us, next to our table, but it wasn't looking at the stage like everyone else was. That technician came over, remember, and even he was just watching the animatronics. I guess he was trying to figure out what was happening. I looked over at the mascot, and it looked back at me. He stopped. John, what? Charlie said, impatient. Then the animatronics on the stage stopped moving, and I looked over at them. And when we all turned back around, Michael was gone. And so was that mascot. Charlie stared at him in disbelief. You saw the kidnapper, she said. I don't know what I saw, John said. It was all chaos. I didn't even think about it. I didn't make the connection. It was just another animal at Freddy's. I didn't think about who might have been inside it. I was a kid, you know? You figure that the grown-ups already know everything you know. Yeah, Charlie said. I know. Do you remember anything? What the person looked like? John was staring up at the sky as if he was seeing something Charlie could not. Yes, he said. His voice was deliberate, steady. The eyes. They were all I could see, but I still see them sometimes like they're right there in front of me. They were dead. What? They were dead. Just dull and flat. Like they still moved and blinked and saw, but whatever was behind them had died a long time ago. He fell silent. It was growing dark. There was a bright, almost unnatural streak of pink across the western sky, and Charlie shivered. We should get back to the car, she said. It's almost time to meet everyone. Yeah, John said. But he didn't move right away, still staring into the distance. John, we have to go, Charlie said. He seemed to come back to himself slowly. Yeah, he said. We should go. He got up and brushed off his pants, then grinned at Charlie. Race you, he said, and took off running. Charlie chased after him, her feet pounding the asphalt and her arms swinging free. And there we go, guys. That is the end of chapter 3. Holy ass, this story is getting good. So, apparently John has seen the murderer in a separate mascot costume, a Freddy one, which, as we can all probably guess, is probably the yellow bear, which is Golden Freddy. Now, if you remember back to chapter 1 or chapter 2, Charlie mentioned a yellow bear as well, which is all coming together. Why she has vague memories of a yellow bear, and why John has one here. It's all getting pieced together, and we actually, it's getting good. It's getting real good. Chapter 4 is the final one we can read on the chapter. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit that like button. It really is appreciated, and I'll see you soon for the start of chapter 4. I've been Razzbowski, you've been the beautiful bastards as always for watching, and I love each and every single one of you. Goodbye!